The background material in this video can be viewed at thewaythetruithandthelife.net. More specific references will be given in the notes. Hello. It's Sunday, December 9th, 2012, and I'm in my Russian apartment. I'll be leaving this week, but I'd like to share something with you. I'm reminded of what my friend Ontology said about teaching on some subject. He says, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So I'll keep that in mind. And one of the things that comes to mind is about what I want to tell you. It's I would say answering the ontological question of what meaning is there to life. Or I think of that, I believe it was on BBC that I heard years ago, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they ask the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And the answer to that, the answer to the ultimate question of the life, the universe, and everything. And as those of you who are aware of that program, after going all through the universe, found this magnificent computer and it told them the answer. Well, I have an answer. And I would like to share it with you. I've been sharing some things with Jesse T. Peterson, and he's concerned about the status of men and the breakdown of the home. And I am too, but there's many other deeper things. I was trying to ask myself these basic questions when I was, I think I was 20. I had been working on construction on the Niagara Power Project, and then went with Selby Drilling on a dam project, drilling and grouting in New Jersey, in the mountains of southern New Jersey. But I decided to quit and get a regular job and raise a family. And I had gone to school in Rochester, New York, for computer repair, sort of the mechanical calculator computers. It was just before the modern computers were just coming out. I worked for Frieden Incorporated, and I was sent to Syracuse. There were no openings in Buffalo, and I'm laying in my room, single room that I had rented there. I was coming back to Buffalo weekends, and I asked myself this question: what gives life meaning? Or what's the purpose of existence? And what I came to is the most unreasonable thing an intelligent person can be subjected to is just being alone. The meaningful life has to do with fellowship. And so I reasoned that to really understand the ontological question of what gives life meaning and purpose, you need to study sociology. So I went to Syracuse University and signed up with Professor Bell to take Sociology 101, where I learned that children that are set aside and only fed and bathed at birth die. That's what they called in the old days marasmus. Now they call it infant atrophy. That and further that in Boston got the government enough to keep birth and death statistics around the turn of the century. There was a squalor of immigrants living many times 2-3 families in an apartment, and no running water, no inside toilets, and the colleges were teaching that the high infant mortality rate, which was, I believe, close to 50%, I forget the figure now, but very high, at least 1 in 3 died before a year old. And they said this was, they were teaching that this was due to poverty and the lack of sanitation. But when the records started being kept and were investigated in Boston, in these poor immigrant communities, there was a very low sickness and death rate. The infant deaths were occurring of marasmus were occurring in the orphanages and amongst the wealthy that hired babysitters and wet nurses. So, at any rate, that was interesting to me. And I went on to reason that to really understand sociology, the group behavior, you needed to understand psychology. And to really understand psychology, you needed to understand the brain. You needed to understand physiology and neurophysiology. To really understand physiology, you need to understand the cell, cytology. Well, to really understand the cell, you need to understand chemistry. And to really understand chemistry, you need to understand physics. And to really understand physics, you need to understand mathematics and computers, because that's what you express the ideas in to test if they behave the way you experience in your observations of reality. So I ended up with a degree. I was by that time I had had to quit my job with the calculator company. I had been repairing. By that time I was married and living in Buffalo, New York, in an apartment. I wanted to buy a home. I was repairing calculators in Buffalo. I bought a home, and my wife was going to help by working evenings. She had worked while going to college at Duville evenings and packing meat in a supermarket, and she was going to do that again. But I bought the home, and she quit looking, and I, what are you doing? She says, I'm not gonna. And I didn't have enough money to pay the bills. I said, you've got to. She said, no, I don't want to. Oh, at any rate, my Volkswagen broke down, and I was hitchhiking and taking the bus to work at Bethlehem. Oh, I was going in the hole. I was repairing a calculator at the blast furnace superintendent's office, and that was during the Vietnam War, and they were pumping out steel from the Bethlehem steel plant. And I'm repairing the calculator. At that time I was in the Masonic fraternity, and so was he, and we were chatting as brothers in the Masons. And I told him how much trouble I'd had. My wife had said she would help, and I had taken on a new home, assumed a GI mortgage, and I had to borrow a third of the cost of the home on a second mortgage, and I just couldn't pay my bills. And he says, well, why don't you come here? And he said how much I would make if I got a job there as an electrical helper. And he said they're very much in need of people. So I did. I went to work at Bethlehem. I became an electrician, and then I went and was in charge of maintenance at Lake Erie Rolling Mills, and then I was promoted to supervisor of mechanical maintenance at Roeblen Steel. And I went from there to carborundum research, and I was going to night school when I could get a chance. And I took I was working on nuclear ceramics, Al2O3 matrix with boron carbide embedded in it. Did some discoveries, but how to sinter it with and have the homogeneity was a discovery I made by embedding it in a cylinder of carbon, so that there wasn't a gaseous environment but more a solid environment that gave a sharper temperature and prevented the surface of the extruded rods from oxidizing, which was happening in the tube furnaces. But I went to night school and finally got a leave of absence and ended up with a degree in mathematical physics. And with 3 children, 6, 7, and 8 I think at the time, I decided to teach high school physics where I could also be with my children and do my own research. At any rate, that's my background of trying to understand things, and I've been working the rest of my life since then. Enjoyed teaching physics as a laboratory science by learning by investigation. A whole bunch of things I could talk about there that give some background, but let me get to the point, the meaning of life. And I did go back and study many things. And I've been calling the Jesse Lee Peterson show now I think 3 or 4 times and sharing. And I do have insights. I do have insights into child care and human growth and development and the basic difficulties that human governance is working with, and the ignorances that they're working with, the good and the evil, and what is good and evil. What do we mean by saying such words? Well, let me start with here in Russia. There's the ethnic Russians have more abortions than live births. Not with the Muslims. They have a birthing policy, and will it's expected to be a majority in Russia by 2040. And like the Turkish general said, we don't have to take Europe by jihad. We're going to ride the democratic bus. And in Gaza, they've increased their population something like 15 times the average ages in the teenagers. But this birthing policy. At any rate, I'd like to share something that will give insight into these things going on and the future and the past. Let's deal with the past. First of all, to me, creation is not magic. There's people that say the Bible says creation 6,000 years ago. There's physicists that say Big Bang creation, magic, poof, something from nothing 10 billion years ago. They're nonsense. Matter is not created or destroyed. It's eternal. And that's what I call God's eternal physical body. Infinite space, infinite matter, infinite motion, but the density of matter and motion are finite. And in this eternal substance, vortex rings form and particles form, and they go apart and they come together, and there's coalescence into forming atoms and planets and galaxies, but it's in a background of a gas called ether, which supposedly was disproved by the Michelson-Morley interferometer, which is another ignorance. Gravity and the distorted space and matter a function of velocity is an ignorance. So matter a function of velocity I can explain in a hurry. That if you send a charged particle in a magnetic field, it goes in a circle. And you can set vectors up between the circle and the center, and the force is equal to the mass times the velocity squared over the radius of this circle. And that you can predict, given the velocity and the radius, what the mass is going to be. And when they sent particles in faster and faster, accelerating them through a linear accelerator, and knowing the speed of the particles, the equations didn't work. And Einstein, there was a factor of the square root of 1 minus v squared over c squared in there. And Einstein put that over underneath the mass, and he said that is the mass. It changes with speed. Well, that was just nonsense. Here, the truth of the matter is, gravity is the shadow effect of this background of ether moving, and that can be easily understood, actually. It's so easy. In my website, thewaythetruthandthelife.net, there's a derivation of the universal law of gravity, and it doesn't have anything to do with magic. But that's another thing. So here's this eternal matter and motion. All right. Then we have galaxies forming out of all this substance, and in the galaxies coalescing in particles coming together by gravitation. And as I say, the gravitational laws there, that you can see that they're being forced together by the shadow effect. The power of the light shining, as it were, pushes objects together, and they have a shadow on one another, so that the two objects are pushed together because they shadow and there's less force in the middle of them. All right, so that's gravity. And as far as the Earth goes, and my whole purpose here is to get back to the origin of life and human behavior and the meaning of life, as I said. But we know that North and South America were joined to Africa and Europe and Asia in what was called Pangaea. And the Antarctica was in that too. We know this because there are dinosaur bones around the whole ring. This was like Venus. It faced the Earth, faced the sun all the time. And the spot which the sun was shining on built up a land mass, and there was a ring of life, too cold beyond it, too hot this way. And there was a weather formation with the hot spot, the vapor rising, cooling, and coming down, that we had virtually a tropical zone, a ring around this spot that constantly faced the sun. Then, about 65 million years ago, the moon was caught in an orbit synchronized similar to the Earth and drawing closer and closer, and the moon hit the Earth from behind, spreading Pangaea out, spreading the Antarctica down here with all its dead dinosaurs. You can find their parts in the rocks there, as you can all around when what was Pangaea spread out. Because the impact was so strong, it killed all those large reptiles. The smaller mammals and birds were able to survive this traumatic event. And where before it was a ring of life facing the sun, now it was a ring of life in the equator. And in this environment, mammals began to thrive. Before, they were just food for alligators. But we genetically go back. And here, I want to connect things to the Bible. This idea of life forming out of the chemicals, the first cells had genetics, but and there are still some of their heritage that the cell divides. That's the way it multiplies. But any genetic variation inside due to radiation, which is commonly bombing around everywhere, that genetic variation is shared. So if there was a good trait, it can easily be destroyed. It's not a very helpful way of evolving. Then somewhere along this line, that one cell attacking another in some way or invading another way, sharing the DNA to form a new life. That this new life had genetics from two parts. This was sexual differentiation. And this is where the atom was the unicellular existence, and this sexual propagation came when part of Adam became Eve. And after that was sexual propagation. Very simple explanation that when someone has some type of insight, but they don't have the detailed knowledge to specify times and places, and don't even have a knowledge of the words to talk about these things that they can think about, they tell a story. Oh, this sexual reproduction is actually our parentage way back, where it's life has not died since then. If at any time between that time and life goes back something like 2 billion years, if at any time that lifeline had been cut that led to us, it would have to have started over again. And to think about a stable system where biological life could exist for in the order of 1 billion or 2 billion years is fantastic to think that it could be. If you look at the moon or Mars or any planet, the asteroid impacts and the asteroid parts of broken planets, all these collisions going on, and the fact that planet sustaining system only has a lifetime of around 10 billion years or less, and either collapses going stone cold or explodes and blows itself to smithereens. But creation is not magic, poof, something out of nothing. It's these things forming and breaking up. But Earth was stable enough for intelligent life to evolve. That's the magic. The probability is so low. Don't look for outer spacecraft to come and deliver you. You're going to have to make them and deliver yourself. Nice you can think about those things. But so here we are. What survives is what propagates, is one of the laws of nature, God's laws. God is everything to me. That's what I mean by God. Matter, space, and motion are infinite, not created, not destroyed. The density of matter and energy are finite. And out of that, vortex rings form, electrons, photons, protons, neutrons, atoms, galaxies, planets. All right. So creation is forming something, like forming a hat. Now, this wonderful process of life, by the magic of such a low probability of escaping destruction, that we've come to be. And we have these stories. And the next segment is to talk about the genetics of human nature, where it came from, and the culture of human nature, and where it come from, and what is so, where is the background, and how can we make sense out of all this information. That's my next discussion. Before I go on, let me make it clear that the universe is a sea of matter. Dark matter is, there's some vortices already forming, and it perturbs the vortices that amount to photons as they travel through and may divert the path and so forth. But there is no emptiness in space. There's a relatively uniform density of this basic matter that is inviscous and inelastic and is the source of pressure, to the point that the smallest vortex ring involved in a photon or an electron is being held together by the bombardment of this matter sea that it's floating in. Much the same as if you make a vortex ring in water, or a smoke ring in air. But that's another thing. Now, this genetic development, the fact that life is unending, life has not died since it started on Earth. If it died, it'd have to start all over again to bring us into existence, to create us, to form us out of the matter and the laws of it. And again, God's laws. God's laws of gravity. Don't jump off a 5-story building, he'll kill you. Don't stick your hand in a light socket. His laws of electricity will kill you. In God we live and move and have our being. There's nothing outside of God physically. God is not created or destroyed. His body is the physical matter, space, and motion. All right. Now, this is genetics. This, after the dinosaurs were killed, and they weren't around to eat the mammals anymore, mammals became the dominant species and proliferated. And the laws of what survives propagates. And the monkeys living in the trees lived very well, but there was a point where there were grasslands, and man evolved out of the trees onto the plains, learning to walk and run to chase game. And that transition, the great apes, chimpanzees and apes, don't kill, the women don't kill, the females don't kill their babies. Most of them breastfeed until the second set of teeth. That would be equivalent to 5 or 6 years old. And there is no relationship among them of the child with the father. Paternity is a later thing. It's true that there is survival of paternity, and we have examples, and I believe there is one small monkey type that the males care for the children too. But and we have the examples of the birds, how beautiful. I just love the doves. But and the way birds work together, although there's what you might call evil birds too, the ones that are big and lay their egg in another bird's nest, and that hatches, and the surrogate parents care for it, and it kicks all the little babies out and kills them of the original eggs. At any rate, that's what survives. That's part of God's laws. It doesn't mean that it's nice, but it is what survives. And amongst mammals, what survives is the strongest male that gets to impregnate the female. His genetics survives. And what survives with the female? The female that can accommodate this enough to go ahead. And we just witnessed here in our Russian apartment, there's 4 buildings around a soccer field and a playground. A couple of weeks, night and day, this dog was in heat. And here they don't have an SPCA. They have a man that goes around shooting the dogs. And then the women around here were so strong when he come calling all the dogs hanging around, they stopped him. And at any rate, that's a whole nother story of where the Russian culture is. But day after day, night after night, this poor female dog being raped, and these male dogs fighting each other and then attacking her. But that is part of our genetic history. It's what survived. And the female dogs don't hold it against their pups. They don't associate the violence done to them. And the strongest male propagated. There are examples where male dogs will even kill another dog's litter so that they can stop the female from breastfeeding, and she'll go into heat again. But and he'll have a chance to propagate. But that's a bit of a distraction. What is the story of the Garden of Eden? What does that? Now, I've already talked about the single cell propagation by cell division evolving into impregnation, forming 2 sexes, as the pardon me, we call this noise here Moscow music. Goes on all the time. But that's a car alarm. But this forming Eve out of Adam's rib is the story that represents this single sex existence of this life that has never died, giving up part of itself and joining again to form life. But in that, the genetics of there's always damage coming, chemical or the background radiation changing the DNA structure. And if you have a damaged DNA, a weakness, and you interbreed with your family, they have many of the same weaknesses you do, and it causes degeneracy. So it's part of God's laws that you need to bear children with strangers, genetic strangers, so you don't have the same weak genes. And from this, the males that amongst the mammals that attack another group to get their females have stronger genetics. And the Steven Pinker presentation about violence. Steven Pinker did a wonderful job. That's at the TED lecture you can find in YouTube. But he made one error. He didn't understand affluence actually was the degradation of child care, because affluent women hire people for their babysitters. So the Renaissance was really the degradation of child care for the upper classes. The lower classes immigrated to America and started family farms, but that almost imitated the wonderful family care that is part of the anthrope culture of China because of family farming. The family farm, the mother and father are there to care for the baby, just like the great apes. The mother is always with the children to provide that nursing bond. And we need to talk about that. But first, let's lay the foundation. Women came from a background of being forced into sex. The great apes do not associate that problem with the infant product of it. Father-child relationship isn't there. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil was when man evolved out onto the plane and developed the logic to associate verbally, symbolically, this with that, cause-effect relationship. And over time, and the females learned that that snake is the male genetics, the seduction of the female is the female genetics, but that contempt for the rape, women not able to control their own fate except by manipulation, using religion or whatever now. They don't need it anymore. That's another thing. We'll get to that. Let's lay the foundation of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was the genetics developing. We have 96% in common with the great apes. That 4% gave humankind, gave females the ability to associate their child with the violent rape. And here in Russia, there are more abortions than live births for the ethnic Russians. The Muslims have a birthing policy. They're going to have a majority probably by 2040, it's figured. And just like the Turkish general said, we don't need to take Europe by jihad. We're going to ride the democratic bus with their birthing policy. And like Gaza has increased its population 15 times since 1948, and average age of a child is in its teens there. With their birthing policy as a way to develop children to sacrifice in the war against Israel. Child sacrifice is alive. At any rate, let's get back to this problem that women have with associating the child. Genetically, there's an association of the child with the violence. And women have, you can check this out on the internet under infanticide. Women have historically gotten rid of many of their children, whether leaving them in the forest for the wild animals, throwing them in the river, sacrificing them to the god of the mountain and throwing them off. All of these things. And let's lay a little bit more before going on with this problem of women getting rid of their children. There's the male genetic snake, which is the erection, and the female genetics that is a victim of the snake, and the knowledge of good and evil, that the woman associates the evil with the product of the evil, her child, and can have both love and hate. The dog doesn't associate that litter with the rape, and they care for them. It's wonderful. But they care for them if they were cared for. But now, with this background of violence, which Steven Pinker, as I had mentioned, shows that we're living in one of the safest times, that historically hunter-gatherers, the violence was up to 60% of the men died by violence, and the reasons were protecting their territory, and the main one, attacking another tribe to get their young women. And that's part of God's laws of genetics. The tribe that attacked another tribe and got strange genetics in their tribe was a stronger genetic tribe, because intermarriage is a problem. It causes genetic degeneracy. There's a genetic problem with the Jews of nerve growth factor not going away, but I'll get into that more in a minute. So here we are with violence being normal. You can go to the TET lecture and listen to that. But Pinker made the one error in thinking about enlightenment, or like a Renaissance is a wonderful thing. Actually, it led to the degradation of child care. Now, the good cultural thing come from two sources. First of all, the mammoth hunters of Europe. It took a large group of men. Here's tons of meat in one animal, and it takes an army to capture and kill it, and it takes an army to transport it. An army of people working together with integrity, trusting one another, managing the boats and rafts, and sailing hundreds and thousands of miles after a while. And they ended up with a sailing culture, but they ended up with a male culture that had this working together. I would rather call it anthroculture, because the word culture has been corrupted into narcissism. Anthroculture, like horticulture or agriculture. Anthrop meaning human growth and development. But these Norsemen that learned to sail, they left table rocks. They're here in the Caucasus, and they're all along the seashore over to Korea. They sailed the oceans. They learned to sail by the stars, spending all those nights afloat, getting home with the large carcasses down the rivers, like the Don River. And you can see the mammoth bone homes that they built in their settlements down near the Caucasus. At any rate, they learned to sail, and they had this knowledge of the stars, And over in India was a corrupted culture formed by invaders from Europe and from the north, dominating and making a second-class structure. But they had affluence. There was an upper class whose children were cared for by servants. And this has always been a problem because they end up narcissistic and they're very capable of manipulating. And here is this narcissistic upper class, and here's these sailors coming through, and we know about them because they left table rocks, that it took this large crew of men working together to put a table rock on top of 3 other uprights. So this was long before Stonehenge, although Stonehenge grew out of that culture. But this led to these narcissistic people taking over this knowledge that they sailed by the stars, and they made a sophistry of stargazers that come to us. The stars guide these ships, they guide your life, we can tell you what your future is. And if the stars were gods that could guide you, the planets that moved among the stars must be really strong, and end up with the Roman and Greek gods of Mercury and Venus and so forth. But in Ur of the Chaldees was a port area, and all this knowledge was there in a subterfuge, and all the saint worship and child sacrifice, and not saint worship, idol worship. And Jewish folklore says that Abram's father was a idol manufacturer, that he created idols for people. People would have their own private idol, and they could sacrifice to it, or pray to it, or whatever. And Abraham was aware of this sophistry, and Abraham was aware that these stars that were gods, and the super gods of planets that moved among them, and the moon and the sun that moved around, there was a point where there was nothing. The North Pole, all this gods moved around it. There's the most high unseen God, the power point. Well, from this, Abram went on to become Abraham, his relationship with this most high unseen God, who he was willing even to sacrifice his son to. Child sacrifice was okay. People were doing it all over. His father built idols they sacrificed to. That's one opinion at any rate, or one of the things that supposedly was. So we have a problem here, this folklore. What's the value of it? We have things like the Great Flood, and it's in many cultures, probably because after the Ice Age, as the ocean raised up, there was a point where the Gibraltar barrier broke, and what is now the Mediterranean Sea was flooded by the ocean, flooding in and going up over Syria and the land of the 7 churches, which was taken over by the Turkish Muslims, and but where Arafat, Mount Arafat is, that the water flooded. That story is in many cultures, and there's some insight here that was shared by Bruno Bettelheim. Bruno Bettelheim was a survivor of the Nazi Holocaust. Him and his wife in Austria had raised an autistic American girl, young girl, as foster parents. He had learned psychology at the university, and the psychology of the day, and Freud had built a number of compartments which made it more sophisticated than thinking of a person as an entity, but our knowledge of physiological basis of psychology today shows how many of his things are seriously flawed. But we have wonderful knowledge today that didn't exist in his day. We learned so much of God's laws. To me, God is everything. The physical universe is God's body. In God we live and move and have our being. And if we observe God's laws, like not sticking our hand in an electric socket, we do much better. And we're learning God's laws, but that's the end point. So here we are with these stories, and Bruno Bettelheim survived the Nazi Holocaust and ended up professor of psychology and education at the University of Chicago, and had a school for autism. He escaped the Nazi concentration camp. We talked about him being brought out or told that in 1939 some Jews were released, and for Himmler's birthday or something like that. At any rate, he came to America. His first wife had divorced him. He got work at the university, married again, had a couple daughters, and wrote a number of books. The study of the Holocaust, the kibbutzim in Israel. He wrote on children's needs. He wrote on folk tales. And he was funded to have a live-in school for autistic children by the Ford Foundation. That he was highly respected. You can find the films that highly respect him on internet videos, but and interviews and programs. But his first wife had divorced him. His second wife died of a heart attack, and in the 90s he retired, and he came through on a university tour of colloquia, and came to the State University in New York at Buffalo, and I attended his lecture, and afterwards I had an opportunity to talk with him, and I asked him, "Are you religious?" And he said, "No." He's Jewish, but he's not a religious Jew. But he said, "I have a great respect for the Jewish Bible because of the folk tales in it. Those folk tales you can find in many healthy cultures. Before the written word, the elders passed on these stories, and the nonsense stories were dropped. In the verbal culture where elders were respected, it was these good teaching lesson stories that went on, that had basic truths to them, like the jealous brother." And it was wonderful. I was so thankful for some of his insights. I had enjoyed reading his literature. And then it was tragic to learn he was, his character was assassinated after he died by two groups. And I'll explain that. First of all, the background with the Jewish and this folk tales. The Jewish folk tales were not written down until Moses' time, and that was hundreds of years after Abraham and his family and the people that lived under his control were moved to Egypt and lived there long enough to create a nation. There were no priesthoods. The Levitical priesthood was formed by Moses when they came out of Egypt. And but now, so these stories were told word of mouth for hundreds, some for thousands of years, like the flood. And then finally, with the written language, after Moses came out, they were written down. But here's, that's going back to the folk tales. Okay, but here's where Bruno Bettelheim, to get away from this, I'll share with where he was character assassination. He showed the cause-effect relationship between maternal inability or deprivation of a child and the breastfeeding and these things as the source of autism. And what we now know is we don't get more brain cells very much. It's the dendrites and neurons growing and interconnections, and nerve growth factor is only present in certain areas of brains at certain times. The first 6 months are critical, and they need that bond, nursing bond with their mother for this development, because what happens is the cell puts out a little hair-like projection with this nerve growth factor present, and if that is stimulated, it becomes a connection. If it's not, it just goes away. It doesn't develop into a full axon or dendrite. Okay. The nerve growth factor goes away. If it doesn't, that's the problem with the largely in the Jews, the children with this problem of nerve growth factor not going away usually die by 5 or 6. But that comes from the Jewish inbreeding. But it's prevalent in other people. It's just that it's more prevalent there because they tend to only marry Jews. All right. So we have this background of the Jewish people, and Abraham gave humankind a special gift. This child sacrifice, read about it. It was all over. And Abraham is the archetype example that he was going to sacrifice his son to God, and to prove that he really loved God. And God then told him, no, I provide an animal. And so Abraham was the archetype person to found a culture that respected children, not to sacrifice them. To sacrifice an animal instead, and then you can cook it and eat it. The priesthood didn't come until the Levitical priesthood with Moses, hundreds and nearly almost 1,000 years later. It was just a special people who didn't do child sacrifice. And they come out of Egypt, and there's these tribes that are murdering people and doing child sacrifice. And yes, they did exterminate some of them. Men, women, and children, wanting nothing of them except to have a safe and sane place for children to live without being sacrificed or without having to worry about being attacked and murdered, which was a common thing even for the healthy genetics of getting a strange woman. So the Jewish set a new trend, not child sacrifice, and not attacking the next tribe to get your women. Although in here, in the Caucasus, they're still stealing wives. Still stealing wives here. It's not part of the Islamic culture worldwide, but it's part of the Islamic culture in the Caucasus. You steal a young woman and violate her, and then her family would be disgraced to take her violated one, and you go find out what you have to pay them for their daughter, or however they bargain. And then there's revenge sometimes and all that. That's another story. Where are we? We're at the point where Abraham has moved with his love of God, of existence, of children. He has served God as an archetype to make a sane and safe culture for children to them, an anthropoculture. And Moses went on beyond that to give the 10 Commandments that even Pharaoh was guilty of murder if he killed children. So here we had law and order. What a wonderful gift to mankind. Don't kill babies, and it's universal law. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't murder. This is wonderful. And then with the Levitical priesthood, how this is sanctification. These were a set aside, a different people, a sane and sober people. But how to keep this culture alive in all the conflict that's coming and all the degradation of the tribes around with their looking for strange women and sacrificing people and murdering people to get what they want, what they have. These Arab tribes and all the robbery and murder. At any rate, they preserved this sanctified, separated group by having the boys memorize the Torah. That made them robots of the culture. And that culture went on all the way till 1948, when Israel opened up. There's a people there. It's a nation that got their land back. They existed in absentia for thousands of years because of this robot indoctrination of the Torah. Muhammad learned about that they murdered for Yahweh. Well, if you don't do what I want, my God, you're gonna be killed, and I have the right if you're not serving Allah, my God of power, my strong power, God, then I have the right to murder you and take your wife and your goods. But that's in the Quran. But that came from Muhammad being a camel driver and learning from the priests and rabbis as they traveled. He was a very intelligent man, and a very, in his culture, a very honorable man. He married the widow of the man who owned these caravans and was very honorable with her. Very highly respected in the sense of relationship with her, and doing the company service honorably and honestly. At any rate, he learned much and used it. Then after she died, he went on to get many wives and much booty and make himself the last great prophet. And Jesus was just a prophet, not the Son of God. But look what Moses did. He brought universal law that all children are safe in God's eyes. And anyone that murders a child, I'm not talking about stopping the life of a suffering, distorted fetus. I'm not talking about judging Bruno Bettelheim, whose daughters didn't want to have anything to do with him, and his wife had died, and he's there alone being degraded, watching his life's work be degraded by the Jews because he wrote a book, the introduction. There was a man, a survivor of the Holocaust, wrote a book about it, and the foreword was written by Bruno, as another survivor of the Holocaust, and he said the Jews were in part responsible because they had all kinds of warning, but they were too attached to their material goods that any of them sent their sons and daughters to England or America or something, but they stayed there because they were too interested in their material goods until they were hauled off. So he brought this up. So the Jews had a grudge against him, even his own daughters, apparently. And the women's liberation, because he understood that it was the crime against the children of the lack of the maternal nursing bond that caused autism. Autism, when I was born, was 1 in 1,700. Last year, 2011, by the Center for Disease Control Studies, showed 1 in 46 boys have autism now. It's an epidemic that's grown exponentially generation to generation because every child that's raised in daycare is less able to care for their children, who in turn the problem is magnified in the next generation of daycare raised children. Except for the farm families like the Amish that do homeschooling. It's still 1 in 17,700. There's a lot of things we could talk about, but laying the foundation for understanding the genetic problem with men not being responsible with their penis, and the genetic problem with women with manipulating because they were abused and didn't have power other than manipulating. The priests, now the churches are empty in Europe because they don't need the priest anymore. They used him against their husband, and now they don't even need a husband. If they have one and he doesn't behave, she has him thrown out. The same thing's happening in America. They don't need the churches anymore. The church was feminized. Part of female liberation. They overtook, and that's its own, the worldly Christian church, a feminine institution like communism, where here in Russia they had women retire at 55. Men, the life expectancy, the men have to go to 65, and they don't have a 65 life expectancy. That's a whole nother thing. Men are not respected here. We have home missionaries. They have, unfortunately, pairs of females go with it, and don't let married couples go 2 by 2. But one of the women missionaries from Kazakhstan, Russian culture, says she has problem preaching Father God because in Russia the men are so disrespected. At any rate, and that's true, by the way. But and there's a lot of things we could talk about that. But let's get back to the core here. Male genetic problem, female genetic problem, culture being attacked, the male culture because the higher level anthropoculture is not genetic, and it's because of fathering, and it isn't genetic. So if there isn't a father to raise a son, the son doesn't have the enculturation, anthropoculture, to be a father. So there's a breakdown, and we have to recognize this and look at the things that bring back this integrity and the ability to grow from caring for self to caring for the homoerotic, caring for others like self, that if you don't grow through that, you're homosexual, to caring for the opposite sex, that if you don't grow through that, you're caught up in chasing women or men, whichever you are, the opposite sex. What happens when you have a baby? Are you capable of caring for that little child? Selfless, just helpless little child that needs to be treated like royalty. Then give them perfectly good food and they turn it into a diaper change. But they go, and you got to run around and find out what they need. But they need that maternal nursing bond. That's genetic. Every child needs it, man and woman. But then to have integrity and respect themselves and respect others like themselves, they need a caring bond with the Father, with the strength to stop them intellectually and physically from harming themselves. They need to respect and care for themselves from harming others. They need to respect and care for others and help them grow with this ability to care in cooperation with that mammalian nursing bond, but protection from that genetic resentment of the baby, genetic resentment of the man, and the man's genetic attachment for sex. We have to recognize, and here's the political consequences of, I call them insanities because they don't recognize it, Nazism and doctors and Islam. Masculine control. Don't kid yourself. It was the doctors from the medical school going into the military and into the power groups in Turkey at the turn of the century that made the Young Turks, and with the cooperation and financial support of Germany working together, building railroads and so forth, and making an army of which Turkish officers and German officers interchanged in the First World War, but enabled this Young Turks to murder all those weak, feminized Christian Armenians. And with that model went on, it was the doctors in Germany, that was in the 1910s, and in just 20 years later, the German doctors are killing their disabled and their mental patients, setting up the institutions and the paperwork for murdering, and they were just enlarged, still often governed by the doctors, to include communists and Jews in extermination in Germany in the 1940s. Masculine genetic insanity gone wild. Islamofascism. And the female manipulative control with the feminized worldly Christian church and communism, socialism. two evils, Islamofascism and worldly Christianity, women's liberation, communism. Both of them have a genetic foundation, one female, one male, and then it's in a type of insanity of which Abraham and Moses and Jesus showed the way to respect life and build a culture on law and order and respect for fathers who keep the law, because that's a whole nother thing. A woman can have a stroke and still talk where a man can't, because a woman's logical brain is split. Logical and verbal and non-logical pattern thinking are in both hemispheres, the same as they are in the great apes. But for males, genetically they're different. The right hemisphere comes from the left brain, and that's the verbal brain. The left hemisphere is nonverbal pattern thinking. And where does this go? Is a man more important? No, he has more important skills. Is a woman more important? No, she has more important skills. Not what the man wants, not what the woman wants, what a man and a woman need to have together to make a healthy home and raise healthy children. Jesus was killed by the priests because he said you don't need to serve a priest to have a relationship with your source of creation. In God you live and move and have your being. It's better I die, because when I go away I'll send you the Spirit of truth. It will teach you all things and bring into remembrance whatsoever I've said. And we're in that age of fulfillment where we're learning God's laws of electricity, of atoms, of chemistry, of biology, of physiology, of sociology. We're learning these laws. What makes Islamofascism? What makes worldly Christianity that corrupts the home and feminizes, and the communism which is destroyed, give all these the cattle from Olga's grandparents to the poor and leave them with a blind cow, and a year later all their cattle and horses are dead because the people didn't earn them and weren't responsible and didn't develop. So how do we make a sane culture? Our leaders need to be successful parents. The man is the spokesman, the logical, verbal, brain dominant stuff, and a larger brain. Don't let anybody kid you to count the brain cells. He's got a few billion more. Doesn't mean that he's the most skilled. He's the most skilled in some things. And a woman, he can't take the place of a woman. No man can give. The baby, when it's born, knows its mother's voice and has a negative reaction to a man's voice or another woman's voice. This can be physiologically measured. The need for women to care for their children and do homeschooling is so important. You can't even do homeschooling here in Russia. The women get rid of their babies just like in America. They're getting rid of them up at 6 weeks now. They're so sad. This is the Kenmore United Methodist Church with their signs on the lawn for daycare. These first two signs are from the Kenmore Methodist Church. They take them at 2, 3, and 4 years old. The next three are from over on Military Road, a daycare center. And it broke my heart. I couldn't believe this. They take them at 6 weeks old. And look at the second picture. This is no way that children can see out. Look at the third picture. This just broke my heart because of a seminar that I organized in 1980 on the needs of children, and there was a testimony and a presentation by one of the county administrators of daycare and the grieving about children not being able to see out. That was in 1980. This is the backside of the daycare. And this is the south side. We're at the corner of Military and Henderson Avenue, Military Road and Henderson Avenue. As you can see, no way a child could see out. And same for the front. That open window is not for children. The open door is not for children. As you can see, that goes into the office. And here the whole front. And there's their sign, 6 weeks to 12 years, established in 1984 at 1278 Military Road. No place for children to see out here. They do have children outside today. 2 adults. No, there's 3 adults. And you see, no window there. I was so grieved by what I saw in this daycare. It brought to mind again 8-week seminar I had organized in 1980, where the county administrator of daycare was so grieved about the children not being able to see out of the daycare center that had been established in the former town of Tonawanda police headquarters jail. Things got worse, not better. That you can see the YouTube discussion of an explanation of the seminar with fine university professors and the county head doctor of health and so forth. You can view these the YouTube information given here. My number 284, Needs of Children Seminar. At any rate, there is sanity. It isn't the Islamofascism. It isn't the feminized saint worship of the Shiites. It isn't the Islamofascism of the Sunnis who want to kill the Shiites because they have idols. The same thing you could find in conflict in Christianity. The hate for the saint worship and statues are a violation, but the hate is a violation too. Just that we all live and move and have our being. Religion is our relationship with our source of existence, and it's a personal thing. Personal. We can be living examples to our children and teach them to respect their source of existence. The laws of God are the laws of physics, of electricity, of magnetism, of gravity, of chemistry. We can help our children learn by investigating God, investigating reality. And we can choose our mothers and fathers well. so the next generation is healthier, rather than having so much pity for a suffering degenerate who has genetic defects and murdering healthy children in the womb. I believe with this Garden of Eden explanation and a little knowledge of the source of the male genetic insanity, political insanity, and the female genetic political insanity, and the religious corruption for priesthood power. Even my own home church, I can't give testimony here in Russia because the high priest of our home church, 2x2, is supposed to give up all and take nothing, no purse or script or anything, but they've got more money and they're in control now with a high priesthood. And I can't even give testimony here. Well, I do. I have it in my home. I just was yesterday presided over the funeral of my mother-in-law. And I might as well share a little bit of that with you. But maybe at another time. Thank you. Before I hang up, probably the most important thing. Jesus was killed by the priests and ended the need for making robots, that out of love and care we can raise the next generation to be able to love and care for the next generation. And he sent his apostles out, the first example of 12, 2x2, and most of them went with their wife or sister. Peter and James, good examples. A number of the churches in the 7 churches in land of the 7 churches taken over by Islam now, but the home churches were founded, many of them by Peter and his wife. Paul was a convert from indoctrinated Judaism, and had many wonderful things, and he wasn't interested in getting married, and he made a strong statement of that, but he said it's not from God, it's from me. At any rate, the point I want to leave here is, whether for judges or political representatives or heads of companies or president of a country, it needs not to be a man. A secret that I've discovered, and I discovered this at a Moscow convention of our home church. Here is a wonderful couple giving love, especially to a young woman who was broken. She was removed from the ministry, still loved the service to Christ and the idea of making a sane and safe world. And they had so much love to give, and their home was a host. But this couple wasn't allowed to serve Christ as he prayed with the 70 that he sent out 2x2 and prayed for more to go. They weren't allowed by this high priest to even think. There used to be couples in this home church 2x2 system, but they stopped them. There was some foolish there, a family by the name of Johnson that had a child, and they gave the child to someone for foster care and went out as apostles, and it was a disaster. When anybody could tell you the parents need to stay and raise the child, then go, or take the child with them. But here's the point. To make a healthy anthropoculture, we don't have all that wisdom, but there's a secret. By their fruits you shall know them. We need healthy homes that raise healthy children for the next generation. Nothing against those that don't have children, Let them enjoy their life. But the ones that are grandparents that have raised healthy children, that have raising healthy grandchildren, that maybe have had a home church, and now their family is raised, let them go and share this love that they gave to their children and their grandchildren with the rest of the world. And just like that couple that went to Papua New Guinea and stop cannibalism. My 3.5-year-old granddaughter's calling me. What's up, dear? Come here, say hello. Come here, I'll take your picture. Oh! Here, you want to say hello? Say hello. Okay.
No.
They're not talking. Okay, that's all. Now you gotta, okay, hello. Now you gotta go before Grandpa.
Ocean.
Say bye-bye. Ocean? Oh, I have to go eat. Oh, okay, I'll tell them I gotta go eat. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Well, that's the boss talking. I gotta go eat. So, oh, beautiful picture. Grandparents. The man's the spokesman, but it's not the man in the office, but the couple. And they're chosen as being eligible to run for the office because they've raised a healthy family. Not automatically given them. Let there be competition amongst people that have borne good fruit. And it's a pair, the man and the woman together. Thank you. Well, Ujin is over. That's supper in Russian. That's about all I can speak. But I will take this opportunity to share my belief in religion, a personal thing, and the wonderful development of humankind that came through Abraham and Moses and Jesus and the prophets in the Bible. Not Muhammad. He went off with the male-dominant Islamo-fascists to take control and established a legacy that has harmed so many people with hate. But hate the sin, but love the sinner. I decided I'm going to share the truth value that I see to the intuition that the prophets in the Christian Bible had. I would preface this with an explanation of my personal belief system. That is, that we need to operationally define things. As a physicist, that's clear. That's where the spirit of truth got its start, with the operational definition of things like velocity and force and energy, momentum, so forth. They were words used by different people and they meant different things, and nobody knew because it wasn't operationally defined. Operational definition was like, how do you know you have oxygen? The only gas that will cause a glowing wooden splint to burst into flame is oxygen. So if it causes a glowing splint to burst into flame, that's an operational definition of oxygen. I operationally define heaven as the best that can be, the highest potential of God's creation. And to me, it isn't magic, God sitting on a cloud throwing rocks on bad people and rewarding good ones. God is everything. There's nothing outside of God. And in Him we live and move and have our being, our source of existence. Again, creation is like creating a hat, not something out of nothing. God is eternal. Matter, space, and motion are not created and not destroyed. So, as far as the folk tales and the prophetic statements having some value, some truth value to them, and the ones that appear to be good are the ones that tend to be kept. I see some truth value in these things. Let me go a little bit further. Spirit is outlook. Christ's spirit is Christ's outlook. This outlook, the ability to care, there's predestination. Paul talks about that. That's why children need to be cared for. The sins of the fathers are visited on the children to the third and fourth generation, and by that time the culture is so corrupted that there's just it's degraded into narcissism. But born again is to take on Christ's culture. But we can't really unless we can love. And we can't really love if we weren't loved. Now, I understand intellectually people can care. But to be able to care for a baby, even a woman who wants to, who didn't receive that care when she was young, may very well lack the ability to have a nursing mammalian bond with a child. It takes a good mother to create a good mother. It takes a good father to create a good son. Well, I'm going to start with the crucifixion of Christ, and the idea of his spirit rising into heaven, his outlook going into the best it could be, and the bride of Christ. I will present the scriptures and have it read and then discuss it.
Christ's bride, as Christ's spirit entered heaven at his crucifixion, Revelations 12-1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. 2. And she being with child pride, traveling in birth, and pained to be delivered. 3. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. The male snake, male genetic influence, 4. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. 5. And she brought forth the man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God, and to his throne. The male fathering and prop culture of integrity.
Remember, we're talking about the genetic background of God's laws. Survival of the fittest. Just like the dog in heat here, the dog that has the most strength, male dog, and forces her into submission, essentially a rape. This, over millions and millions of years of our development to becoming human, leaves a genetic background. And again, going back to the Garden of Eden, and the reason that great apes don't kill their babies and women do. Here in Russia, more abortions than live births. But again, the secret with development of verbal logical skills. We're only we have 96% the same genetics as the great apes. But they don't kill their babies, and they breastfeed until the second teeth, which is about 5 or 6 years old. And here's this genetic legacy. The women resented the male domination, and then they became aware of the child being the product of that domination. There is a genetic contempt for men that is projected onto the product of the rape. And by the same extent, the genetic legacy of the men is the snake. The strongest snake gets to impregnate the female. And that's just what we're talking about here, that there is, with God's work in us as intelligence and serving the Spirit of truth and surviving, working together, men working together, cultural phenomena, not genetic, but integrity of a group behavior is what gave the ability to hunt the woolly mammoth and the ability to sail the large boats that would carry it. So Jesus here is spiritually, his marriage is with those who have been born again into his culture, away from our animal heritage, the genetic heritage, into a cultural heritage brought by Abraham, turning against child sacrifice, and Moses bringing the law that all were subject to, even the pharaohs. And then Jesus breaking the priesthood which had saved a special people that did not do child sacrifice, and brought a new culture in the born again, those who are in Christ's culture with his spirit, his outlook. Okay, we'll get on with it.
-6 And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. -7 And there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. -8 And prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. -9 And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, the male genetic snake. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. -10 And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation, and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. -11 And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. -12 Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. -13 And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. The non-genetic but learned male fathering culture born out of the superiority ability of truth with integrity and honest working relationships in hunting and warfare. -14 And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. -15 And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood.
I'll read the last 2 verses of Revelation 12, verse 16. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had cast out of his mouth. 17. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war on her remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Here, the earth swallowing up the wrath was the safe haven for women and for cultural men, was the family farm in various areas. Mainly in China, there was a sane society for family farming, and that's where things like Taoism and later Buddhism found ground to grow in. And Christianity is growing there quite strongly right now, but impeded, of course, by the communist officials, but many home churches. Anyway, that is the allegory here. It went off to make war on those who keep the commandments, those with integrity, and that involves the male domination and whether it's crime or corruption. All right, we'll go on now with the next section.
The male snake took over Christ's fellowship. 3 John 1. This is the beginning of the snake and whore, Catholic and Protestant churches. 5 Beloved, thou doest faithfully whatsoever thou doest to the brethren, and to strangers. 6 Which have borne witness of thy charity before the church, whom, if thou bring forward on their journey after a godly sort, thou shalt do well. 7 Because that for his name's sake they went forth, taking nothing of the Gentiles. 8 We therefore ought to receive such, that we might be fellow-helpers to the truth. 9 I wrote unto the church, but Diotrephes, who loveth to have the preeminence among them, receiveth us not. 10 Wherefore, if I come, I will remember his deeds which he doeth, prating against us with malicious words, and not content therewith, neither doth he himself receive the brethren, and forbiddeth them that would, and casteth them out of the church. 11 Beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. He that doeth good is of God, but he that doeth evil hath not seen God. 16 And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. 17 And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ.
This is the example of the breakdown of what Christ founded. He sent 6 pairs out, and then he sent 35 more pairs out and prayed for more to go and take nothing but the shirt on their back. And I can tell you from traveling across the country at 15 and 16 that I went with money later, and it's a different world. When I went just hitchhiking with nothing, and just like I was put off a train with nothing in because I didn't have a transit visa, and Olga didn't know I needed it. I was put out in Ukraine, and I made it. I made it back. There's a wonderful spirit in people, even this post-communist Ukraine and Russia. But at any rate, the Lord's true servants go 2 by 2 with nothing and find a place to stay and bring the gospel of Christ and then move on. They might go and get their own home in a community to be there and be part of the community. But that's following Christ. This man is an example of the first bishop of the Catholic Church, or whatever, the worldly church that took it off and took control, wouldn't let the brethren come, and started raising money and buying buildings and making themselves a salary in the corruption of Christ's church. All right, we'll get on with it.
Islam
Conquers
the Holy Land. Daniel 11-31 And arms shall stand on his parts, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. 32 And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong, and do exploits. 33 And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil, many days. 34 Now, when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. 35 And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them light, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed.
Well, this is the rise of the male snake. Islam overtaking the Holy Land, Jerusalem, and the Temple Mount, and taking away the Jewish sacrifice and putting a mosque on the Temple Mount. But it speaks for itself.
Islam worshipping the God of forces, Daniel 11-36. And the king, Islamic ruler, shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself, and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. 37. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. 38. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, Allah, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, and silver, and with precious stones, and pleasant things. 39. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. 40. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. 41. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom, and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. 42. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. 43. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. 44. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. 45. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him.
This is going back to the Old Testament, to Daniel, and it's just repeat Daniel's insight, intuition, or whatever you want to call it, into the future of how the nature of God's creation was going to go. And this is the Islam overtaking the Holy Land, and speaks for itself. The God of force, that's and his servant Muhammad, and the God of force, Allah.
Time of the end, Daniel 12-1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was, since there was a nation even to that same time, and at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. 2. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. 3. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. 4. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words, and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased.
This is our current time. Islam has not been destroyed yet, but it's on its way. They're using the horror against it. That's the women's end of it. Women's liberation is going to defeat Islam and the worldliness. That's another subject. But Daniel, so I had some insight into these things.
For corrupted Christian church, Revelations 17-1. And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will shew unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, 2. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. 3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Forth and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Fifth, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Sixth, and I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Seventh, and the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carried her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. Eight, the beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. Ninth, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, on which the woman sitteth.
Well, it's clearly talking about the background of corruption that comes from the female genetic conditioning through God's laws of what survived. She went along to get along, suffering terribly from the snake in her history, genetic history. And we're witnessing a stage now where we're beginning to understand that the Catholic Church, 7 Hills of Rome, and in general the worldly Christian Church, has served women. They used the church as a power tool to manipulate their husbands. The churches in Europe and America are beginning, Europe ahead of America, are basically empty. Women don't need them anymore. They can just call up the police and get their husband thrown out, or don't even need a husband, just go get pregnant if they want a baby, and they can get public child care and support. That's the evil of the female corruption, genetic corruption. They have no it's not an intellectual thing. They're responding to impulses that were given them in a previous time, and it's ingrained in their genetics. But so that's the great whore that played with the snake, and the snake played back. Let's get on with it.
10th, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. 11th, and the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. 12th, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. 13, these have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. 14, these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords, and King of kings, and they that are with him are called, and chosen, and faithful. 15th, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples, and multitudes, and nations, and tongues. 16th, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. 17, for God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. 18th, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
Again, this is just referring to the worldly Christian Church, of which the Roman Catholic Church is the archetype model, with its catering to the females and raising Mary to the position of something to pray to, and saint worship, where Christ's meaning of saint is anyone that believes and follows him. So, and the male contempt for this, whether in Islam or what was left after Islam left Spain, and the corruption in many places where the men, like in Islam, have many women, and that Islamic corruption carried on in the Spanish culture. Just go to South America and check it out. But all right.
The end of worldly Christianity, Revelations 18, first, and after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Second, and he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. 3, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies.
Well, Babylon the Great is fallen. Well, that's not quite yet. Babylon the Great is the Roman Catholic Church in my upbringing, and it seems to make sense. It corrupted and made merchandise and was corrupted by that female manipulative nature that was given her from her source of survival in an earlier time. But let's get on with looking at the end. It isn't quite here yet, but the churches in Europe are pretty much empty, and many of them are converted into mosques.
It is the time to leave the temples. Priests and imams have a direct relationship with your source of existence. Meet in home groups with all sharing their experience and confessing and repent of your errors you have recognized. Respect every healthy child's need to grow in levels of care. Let leaders be married couples that have borne good children. Forth, and I heard another voice from heaven, saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. 5, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. 6, reward her even, as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled fill to her double. 7, how much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her, for she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. 8, therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death, and mourning, and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. 9, and the kings of the earth, who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her, and lament for her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning. 10, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city! For in 1 hour is thy judgment come. 11, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. 12, the merchandise of gold, and silver, and precious stones, and of pearls, and fine linen, and purple, and silk, and scarlet, and all fine wood, and all manner vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and iron, and marble. 13, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men.
Well, where Daniel was dealing with the end of Islamofascism, the male genetic corruption of political life, and here political religious life, and here again dealing with the female corruption of the Christianity and communism. But the intuition of John clearly tells us whether Islam or Christianity, or get out of there and get to know your own God through the example of his Son, Jesus, and how to raise healthy children and have home churches. Let the temples rot. Let the priesthoods go to hell, where they belong. There's no one between you and your source of creation. You have a personal relationship if you want it. You may not be able to love in the animal level sense of it, but I belonged for a time to the Unitarian Church in Buffalo. I had friends that were not able to grow beyond the level of loving their own sex, but many of them were good people trying to make a better world and willing to give unselfishly, having nothing to do with sex. But that's you may not be able to be a good mother or a father, but you can be a good servant of the future in making it a better world, and something of you go on spiritually, your culture, your outlook go on in those who you work with and live with.
14th And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. 15 The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. 16 And saying, Alas, alas, that great city, that was clothed in fine linen, and purple, and scarlet, and decked with gold, and precious stones, and pearls. 17 For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster, and all the company in ships, and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off. 18 And cried, when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? 19 And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. 20 Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. 21 And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. 22 And the voice of harpers, and musicians, and of pipers, and trumpeters, shall be heard no more at all in thee, and no craftsman, of whatsoever craft he be, shall be found any more in thee, and the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. 23 And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee, for thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. 24 And in her was found the blood of prophets, and of saints, and of all that were slain upon the earth.
Well, John is really beating the drum in his deep pain over the corruption of Christ's church. We've given the background of that already, so let's get on with it.
Christ marries his bride. Christ's outlook enters his people through the Spirit of truth. Revelations 19-1 And after these things I heard a great voice of much people in heaven, saying, Hallelujah, salvation, and glory, and honor, and power, unto the Lord our God. 2 For true and righteous are his judgments. For he hath judged the great whore, which did corrupt the earth with her fornication, and hath avenged the blood of his servants at her hand. 3 And again they said, Hallelujah, and her smoke rose up forever and ever. 4 And the 24 elders and the 4 beasts fell down and worshipped God that sat on the throne, saying, Amen, Hallelujah. 5 And a voice came out of the throne, saying, Praise our God, all ye his servants, and ye that fear him, both small and great. 6 And I heard, as it were the voice of a great multitude, and as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of mighty thunderings, saying, Hallelujah, for the Lord God omnipotent reigneth. 7 Let us be glad and rejoice, and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready. 8 And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of saints. 9. And he saith unto me, Right, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he saith unto me, These are the true sayings of God. 10. And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, See thou do it not, I and thy fellow servants, and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy.
Clearly, not even supposed to worship this messenger from the future, let alone saints, which are anyone that follows Jesus the Christ. But here again, talking about the heaven, which is the reality to come in God, in reality. And it has to do with the potential of what can happen. And the respect for God mentions fear here. Well, we need to fear God's laws. Don't jump off a 5-story building, because God will kill you. You better be afraid of that height. But the idea of a new world where there is carrying an individual sovereignty, that everyone was brought up, that they could go from caring for themselves to caring for boys and girls like girls, and grow from there to care for girls like boys and boys like girls, and to go from there to having a baby, and to go from there to caring for that little darling and protecting its life, not murdering it, with a mother in the home and a father providing protection and the home to live in, that the mother can be with the child. If possible, a family farm, but how can you afford to in this socialist society that taxes you so high? It's got to be a mechanized farm now. But at any rate, the future welcomes us as we wake up with the Spirit of Truth.
The Spirit of Truth, in Home and Family Fellowship, Revelations 19-11. And I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. 12. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written, that no man knew, but he himself. 13. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. 14. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. 15. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. 16. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings, and Lord of Lords. 17. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, Come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God. 18. That ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. 19. And I saw the beast, and the kings of the earth, and their armies, gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and against his army. 20. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophets that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. 21. And the remnants were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh.
So, the Islamo-fascist and the feminized worldly Christians will bite the dust. But those who have a personal relationship with their source of creation, care about their children and care about the future, and take the gift of life that they have and try to improve things for those they hand it to. can live in peace and joy once this warfare is over. Notice here, the sword comes out of his mouth. That's the spirit of truth, and the horse, the white horse, is the discovery of God's laws, riding reality, God's laws of physics and chemistry, biology, physiology, sociology, psychology, ontology. What's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? We're getting there.
The beast, communism and worldly Christianity, and false prophets, Islam and fascism. Revelations 20-1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Second, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Third, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. Fourth, and I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them, and I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads, or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. 5. But the rest of the dead lived not again, until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. 6. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years.
Well, you can see the mark of the beast on Ash Wednesday, or you can see the mark of the beast in these Islamists that have overtaken the Arab Spring. You see that bump on their head. They bang the floor for Allah 5 times a day. But we need to pray for these people, that it is their errors that die. We need to not hate, because the feminine corruption is manipulative, divisive, deceptive. It's a way a powerless woman could try and have some power. The male domination is to physically dominate and hate. Well, both ends. The communists hated, the Nazis hated, the communists coming out of Christianity, and the fascists coming out of Islam. Germany really did work together with Turkey, and not directly exterminating the Armenians, but the Germans were sharing military officers and built railroads to transport them to their death. At any rate, let's get on with it.
The present age with Islamic child sacrifice and women's liberation, child neglect and murder. Revelations 20-7. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. 8. And shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the 4 quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. 9. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. 10. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. 11. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. 12. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. 13. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. 14. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. 15. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire.
Well, The great white throne is intelligent in God's body with the ability to use the laws intelligently, where we come from a genetic time and chance development, but we are a product of life that has not died in the order of 2 billion years or more. And that future where heaven and earth passed away, that's a future that exists for intelligent life in God. And we have an opportunity to participate in that. Life hasn't died, and the potential for life will never die. We have an opportunity to sow to the future. The judgment is whether or not something is worthy of being propagated, whether it's by following the example or direct physical. There's a wonderful future as we discover the natural laws of God and can cure illness, and we could make much healthier human beings right now. There's a goofy reaction, the ignorance and evil of Islamofascists and their manipulation of people and experimentation, and the claiming to have a superior race. And then on the other hand, the women's liberation, that everything that is pathetic is held up as something to throw money at. But the reality is we could help the future be much more genetically healthy. We can take wolves and make nice puppy dogs out of them. And in God's creation, there's many examples of working together, like the doves and many birds. There's also examples of evil, like that one big bird that lays its egg in a nest and it hatches, and the foster parents take care of it while it grows up and kicks the native chicks out of the nest to their death. But that's survived by God's laws. But when we have intelligence to guide us and to improve things, let's hope we were able to get it together. Even though Obama shut down NASA, maybe private enterprise can pick it up. But we got to get away from this place before it blows up. We got to preserve life for the future. And to me, eternal life is contributing to this intelligent life in God's body, if we are able to give enough love that it grows something, or make a technical invention, or help get humankind in a more secure way. Remember what we need, what gives life purpose and meaning. But I'll save that till after this next clip.
The age of the Spirit of Truth with rule by successful parents. Revelations 21. First, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. Second, and I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared, as a bride adorned for her husband. Third, and I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. Fourth, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Fifth, and he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. 6. And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. 7. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. Women are included, because a man and his wife become one, as Christ and the true church are one. Genesis 2:23. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. 24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Ephesians 5:23. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body.
A few thoughts here. This is obviously talking about the future, and there's only one more clip after this. But we are part of a life with a parentage going back. At some point, a cell that divided. There was no male-female to it. And this insight into the future of learning the mechanisms of intelligence, and we already are replacing body parts, and there appears that sometime in the future intelligent life will be able to make a body that is repairable, no pain, and there'd be no need for biological propagation. But that's a future. It's a potential, so it will be realized. And if we're sane and sober, and time and chances with us, we'll be part of this work in God's body, that is, in physical reality. But the way to get there, given that man is not complete and woman is not complete, they need to work together as a pair until this genderless reality exists. Men and women need to work together and use their various expertise, their physical strength, whatever, ability to breastfeed, whatever. We need to respect children and raise healthy children that can go on to contribute to their own future and the future of their children. And again, my wisdom is by the fruit that I get from Christ is, by their fruits you shall know them. And the complicatedness of being able to raise children and love and care and admonition, we need to have successful parents as our authority figures that have cared and raised healthy, sovereign individuals that could raise healthy, sovereign individuals and have the intuition and nonverbal insights and ability to work together, because it doesn't come with a man. Success is not a man or a woman. It's a man and a woman working together. The skills and brain organization are different in men and women. For healthy men and women that are not confused with genetic suppression or gender suppression or something like that. Remember the levels of love, and don't hate those that were deprived. Preordination. You have to choose your parents well. You don't choose yourself. Your parents and their ability to parent are what determines your potential. Again, to me, just two ways that I might serve God to have eternal life. It isn't these bones are chemicals. The matter is eternal. But if I can protect the ability to love and care and raise healthy children in my granddaughter Dorina, something of me and something of that spirit that Christ gives me. She has no father, but yet I am something of a father figure to her, and she gives love and respect to me. And I talk to her like a little adult, 3.5 years old. And that spirit is there. I knew that of the 3 children and some stepchildren. But at any rate, the other way is discovering God's laws of physics and chemistry and working technologically to make it a better world. Those who aren't able to raise children and contribute to eternity with their skill and labor and enjoyment in life. It does look like there's a bad time coming with, I would expect that it's talking about nuclear weapons, fire from hell, but that's up to the future to show. At any rate, let's hope we can solve the problem of sane, healthy child development for leadership by those who have produced sane, healthy, sovereign individuals. And what is it we need for the meaning and purpose of life? It has to do with group behavior. Being alone is boring, if not distressing. What are our social needs? We need security. People lie and steal for security. That is harming somebody else's security. We need response. We need somebody to hear us. And we need recognition. We need somebody to see us. We need somebody to respond to us. And we need interest, new experience. We need to be interested in something. We need fellowship. And this idea of a home church where people share their personal growth experience. And the Bible is words. The description of a thing is not the thing. Write the description of corn on a piece of paper and put it in the ground, it won't grow. The Bible is a description. And without operationally defining the words, the same verse means 20 different things to 20 different people. But as you grow in your experience, you will see different meanings to, and these things written in the Christian Bible are by people who are basically unselfish. Yes, there's some goofy things in there, and you can prove them goofy, but maybe the goofiness is just you not understanding that it was somebody speaking from intuition about something that didn't even exist yet. Maybe it was allegory, not meant to be taken as fact. A year, a day and 1,000 years are the same to the Lord. In God, we live and move and have our being. We need to contribute to the security and well-being of recognizing, not disabling others by enabling them to not take responsibility for their actions. We need to have a justice system that's willing to remove child molesters and not give them a home that costs $100,000 a year. We need to have healthy parents. We need to have healthy families. And the key is, it is the integrity of the male culture. The court system that recognized the rights of blacks in the southern states and a lot of farms and Christian areas. I don't remember the name now, but there was a very noble general who well trained his men, and they fought together, and there was such a camaraderie that they settled part of the land that had been depopulated by the Civil War. And it is those roots in the South that gave rise to the judges, many of them, that brought the level of sanity that black or white wasn't determined. Now that it's gone insane, that a good when I worked at Carborundum Research, a man could support his family. Then they come out with these women's and minority rights, that they didn't have to qualify for the job. To get the federal contract, you had to show you were hiring women and minorities, whether they were qualified or not, and end up degrading the workplace and the amount of money that a man can make, so he can't support a family half the time. That's tragic. It's destroying the child care. We need to have some common sense and intuition that works. And it's not a man and it's not a woman. It's a couple that have learned to work together to raise a healthy family of sovereign individuals. Okay, this has been quite a project. I hope and pray that it serves your purposes in your personal growth. The background material in this video can be viewed at thewaythetruthandthelife.net. More specific references will be given in the notes. Just an ending note, the 3 bedrooms that you see in the beginning and ending are 3 bedrooms prepared for those servants that give up all to carry the gospel out and go 2 by 2, stay in the home, meet people in the neighborhood, gather people together who would like to know more of Christ and know more of the meaning of life, the universe and everything, and fulfillment through Christ's Spirit. One of the homes is for the 2 by 2 servants in Russia. One of the bedrooms is for 2 by 2 servants in Florida, and another bedroom is for 2 by 2 servants in Kenmore, New York. How wonderful it'd be if some couple that raised their children and would like to found another home church come and stay long enough to meet the people in the neighborhood, spend a day's labor for a summer. I bet they'd build a church, don't you? That's it. Oh, that is if they were willing to work an 8-hour day meeting people. That is, finding lost sheep rather than feeding on the sheep.